Richard Tarnoff is Program Coordinator of the Boundary Restorative Justice Program in Grand Forks, BC. Now, Richard has written a paper for the Monitor, is the magazine from the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives. And Richard, you're claiming there that the system, the judicial system that we have today, is designed to decide whether the laws have been broken, not to deal and restore the harm that it has been caused. So can you tell us a little more about what is the problem with our judicial system today?
Well, Pedro, I think that the system we have, and it's pretty much the same as all countries now have, is based on laws. Mm-hmm. How that evolved, I think as societies moved from communities to nation states, rulers needed laws to consolidate their power and to maintain their power, and so that system evolved. I think before we had nation states, we had more of hunting, gathering communities, and they had a system that was mostly based on repairing harm when offenses were committed against members. That was important to maintain the integrity and the health of the community. So circles were held and issues were talked about, and where possible, reparation or compensation was made. As we shifted to nations and we became more based in laws, the needs of the victim primarily became secondary. It wasn't the problem with the offense wasn't so much that some person or group or the environment had been harmed. It was that a law had been broken. And so it was up to the government to prove in a court that a law had been broken, and if so, to punish the offender.
This system of restorative justice has been practiced, you're saying, in the past by tribal societies, and perhaps still being utilized within the native communities until recently?
Yes, and I think right now it still is being practiced in native communities, at the same time that they may also be participating in the regular legal system. But the theory behind it is based on some of the same principles as were developed in those healing circles, and then evolved starting in Australia in the 1970s and gradually coming to Canada, and now it's being practiced all over the world.
The conflict between the laws and the spirit of the law has been going on for 2,000 years or perhaps more, because you see Jesus and the Pharisees arguing exactly the same thing. They were accusing him of breaking the law, when he was saying, "No, I haven't come to break the law, but to fulfill the law," because he was looking at perhaps more the restorative justice aspect, which some people call the spirit of the law, rather than the literal law.
I'm certainly not qualified to give an opinion on that, whether it's the spirit of the law or the letter of the law. But I think the fact that there are people that it's almost inevitable that there's going to be conflicts and disagreements, and restorative justice is just an alternative way of trying to resolve those conflicts without necessarily categorizing somebody as a bad person. The person who commits the offense is a person that's done something wrong, made a mistake perhaps, but isn't necessarily a bad person. And so when we have a forum to try and repair the harm that's been done, we're very careful not to try and judge the person. We just want to identify what happened and what needs to happen to repair the damage.
Mm-hmm. To heal the society at large and the individual rather than to punish.
Well, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And what you say about the society at large is very important, because it's not just the victim who's harmed when something happens, but the community, the wider community is also affected, because there may be, that may be a friend that's been harmed, or it may be cause a feud between different families or different factions within the community. And so it's very important that the effects on the community be recognized, and to try and heal that as much as possible, and to strengthen the community.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's another point that you wrote in this paper of the CCPA, and that is that laws may be created by elected legislators, but those elected have often been carefully selected and groomed by those with the greatest financial power and influence. So what is the result of those elected that have been groomed by the financial powers?
Well, I think it was that portion of the article was more to show that there is really nothing absolute about laws. Laws are made by men, and they're made by men who have particular vested interests in different aspects of the society and the economy. And so the fact that law has been broken, has to be looked at in that context.
Mm-hmm. But does it mean that the lawmakers are going to create those laws in their favor, and the status quo of the legislative system? For instance, you mentioned that lawyers might counsel an individual to lie, to not to be charged with some crime, because they just want to go around the law. They are not interested in restoring the spirit of this person, the habits of this person, but rather to avoid the punishment.
I think that's true. I think that's the job of the lawyer, is to find a way to get the best deal for his client, not necessarily to lie, but to try and use the law to either get him exonerated or to get the least punishment possible. That's the focus. And the focus isn't to repair the harm that's been done to the victim, or even to get the offender on a better path in life.
So another point you have there is that there's implicit assumption that punishment will reform the offender and deter others from offending. You say it's an assumption. What is the evidence that is not so?
Well, I think the evidence is that the amount of reoffending that happens from people who are convicted and put into prison, and there's a high level of reoffending. Now, what is the cause of that? Part of the cause is, of course, that once you have a criminal record, it can make it more difficult to get employment. It can make it more difficult to travel. It puts you in a certain category that is going to make it more difficult for anybody to succeed in life, and somebody who's already grown up perhaps in a disadvantaged environment, it's going to make it that much less likely that they will succeed. But for that reason, and also for the reason that the environment in prisons is not necessarily conducive to coming out and leading a constructive life.
Yeah.
So that happens too.
So how does it affect children also that are brought up in the schools thinking that they shouldn't do something because of the fear of being punished rather than doing it out of responsibility?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in statistics in that field, but my impression from what I've read is that jurisdictions with stricter and lengthier sentences for crimes don't have a lower rate of incidents of those crimes. So those punishments don't really act as a deterrent.
Mm-hmm. You are not arguing against having laws. You say that it's essential for a fair judicial system based on laws to exist. So,
absolutely, because there are many cases where people are accused or charged with a crime that they haven't committed, and if a person believes they're innocent, then they absolutely have the right to a fair trial based on laws. So we need laws in those cases, and we also need laws. Restorative justice, besides the offender being willing to take responsibility for what they've done, you also need to have the victim willing to participate in that process. And so in a case where, for whatever reason, the victim isn't willing, then the case may have to go through the regular judicial system. So you need laws there. And then, of course, there's a very, very small percentage of offenders who do constitute a real danger to the public. And those people the public needs to be protected. Those people need to be incarcerated in a humane way, and you need laws to make sure that that's done properly.
So the idea is not to abolish laws, but rather to focus on an alternative system, which is restorative justice.
Exactly, whenever possible. And we already have it as part of our Youth Criminal Justice Act in Canada, that when the police are investigating an offense, they have to first look at alternatives to laying a charge and, going to trial. So it's part of our law already that they should consider alternatives such as restorative justice. If it's not applicable for whatever reason, then they have that option of laying a charge.
Do you think that society in general is becoming more aware of this alternative restorative justice rather than just looking for revenge?
I think it's slowly becoming more widespread, the information about it. I've noticed articles in a number of magazines and newspapers in the last few years. So I think it is slowly, but I think the majority of people are still pretty much unaware of that. And when I've spoken to people in our community, very few are aware that we've had a restorative justice program going here for about 12 years, but most of the community is unaware of it.
What is that restorative program, restorative justice program consists of? Like, what do you do?
Well, the interesting thing about restorative justice is that it's community-based. There are, in some of the larger cities, the programs are run by the city or run by the police force. But in most cases, they're independent non-profit organizations that have gotten together and arranged to take the training and then exist on their own. And they are what happens in the most cases is that when the police investigate a crime that appears that it would be suitable for restorative justice, they contact our program, and then we look into it, we talk to the people involved, and if we think we could do that successfully, then we take it on and we have the forum. The forum means bringing together the offender, the victim, and any support people they wish to have with them into a circle, talking about what happened, talking about how people have been affected by it, and then asking the victim what they would like to see happen to repair the harm. And the victim can ask for whatever they think is fair. Then the offender is asked if he thinks that's reasonable, and if he does, then that is written up as a contract and signed by everybody. And once the offender has fulfilled what they've agreed to, then that case is closed. The information is given back to the RCMP. It's sealed up, and there's no criminal record. The offender has no criminal record as a result of that incident.
Mm-hmm. So what is the restorative justice programs across BC? What do they need? Is perhaps more recognition from the government, more training, more money? What is restorative justice need to in order to progress, to be more widely accepted?
Well, I think it needs probably all of those things, and it's an evolving understanding of how it can be used, where it can be used, and how best it can be used. And there's many, many aspects of restorative justice that are still being researched, that are only now being attempted by various groups in various parts of the world. Cases of domestic violence and violence against women is an extremely important area and a very sensitive area that needs to be looked at and researched very carefully. And it is being done in some countries, not so much in Canada from what I've heard of, but in England, in Greece, in Austria, and some other countries. It's also in other areas, it's being used to deal with hate crimes. And in some areas, some of the principles, not necessarily the victim-offender model, but some of the principles of restorative justice are being used to deal with long-standing divisions within society. In Cyprus, there's a program using youths of Greek background and youths of Turkish background and youths of Cypriot background to come together and talk about what the issues are and how they can stop being kind of indoctrinated.
Antagonizing each other, yeah.
Yeah. So there's many, many areas where it needs more work. We need to work on improving practices so that we are using the best models and the best practices. The police forces need to be very much involved and very much educated to utilize restorative justice more.
It seems like most of us have made mistakes in our lives at one time or another, and it's about time for restorative justice to focus on solving conflicts in a non-violent way rather than by force, by throwing somebody in jail.
I think that's very true, Pedro, and I can remember instances in forums where victims came into the forum being very angry at the person who had damaged their car or whatever they had done or swiped something from them. And usually by the end of the forum, there's quite a good rapport established between this victim who was very angry at the beginning and the offender who was very feeling very guilty and bad.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Richard, and we wish you well in your business there of restorative justice. I should say business as a service rather than a business, because it's a non-profit service, is it?
That's right, Pedro. It is.
Right. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate your taking the time to call.